Coming up next, we have The Henchman Chapter 6. This is another action-filled episode, so catch up with the other episodes if you need to, or just listen to this one. But first, go into the description and click on the links in there for a free epic fantasy ebook set in the same world, although a different story, different characters. You don't need to know the two, but it's all in the same world as The Henchman. There's also a link for my Substack and for other things like my latest book that has been getting rave reviews on Amazon and other places. All right, so check that out and let's go ahead and get to it. Welcome back to Great Stories Change the World. This is the YouTube channel where a science fiction fantasy author, that's me, goes over different books and movies and reviews them and really focuses on what makes them a good story, or maybe not a good story, because I do believe we can learn the skills in how to tell a great story, and I want to do that because I believe great stories do change the world. And today we're going to be getting into The Henchman Chapter 6. It's been a couple weeks, but I finally got it all sort of put together here for you. We're going to be finishing up the story in another month or two, so we're getting towards the end. But first I wanted to go over a little bit about what I've been looking at and reading and watching, and just kind of give a little update. So first, I read this book called The Sunlit Man by one of my favorite authors, Brandon Sanderson. Now, Brandon Sanderson is a very popular author. I mean, basically he broke the internet with the GoFundMe campaign where this book comes from. This is one of the books, the extra books, you know, because he doesn't write enough already, that he wrote. And I really love the test book. I've reviewed that already on my TikTok and other places, I think on here. But I love that book. The test book was amazing. And this book, The Sunlit Man, was good, but not quite as good as that book, in my opinion. Still very creative, has a sort of Mad Max, Road Warrior vibe to it. The character development wasn't great, so I wouldn't give it kind of the A+ category. But I really dug it. And I really think he's still doing some of the best fantasy science fiction work out there, and it kind of has his modus operandi. It's got his formula to it, which is we're introduced to a magic system, a science fiction system. It's got rules and a world building sort of thing, and then the main character has to innovate with those rules and come up with something new, a new way to do something using the same rules. And that's been something that Sanderson really introduced to definitely fantasy and also science fiction ever since Mistborn. I mean, that's kind of one of his basic things, and he's one of the best at it. So it's a great book, highly recommend it. I've also been watching Shogun. It's almost done. I'm going to finish that probably today or tomorrow. The last episode has come out. If you don't know Shogun, it was originally a book by James Michener, who would write these epic novels about these huge stories. And this is the first season of the new version. They did a version in the 70s, maybe early 80s, with Richard Chamberlain. And so here we're getting towards the end. It's a pretty phenomenal show overall. I really have been enjoying it. I think they were doing a really good job, very creative, and they make translation work, and really dig it. And I also watched Rebel Moon, which is part 2, the Scargiver from Zack Snyder and his, basically, we all know by now, right? It was a Star Wars movie idea that he pitched to Disney, whoever, and of course, you know, they canned it. They were like, no. And so he just kind of reworked names and places and things like that, and got Netflix to give him money for it. It's not really that great. I like part 2 better than part 1. I think there was a little more character development in part 2. Of course, the effects are amazing, but a lot of people can do great effects these days. Really, I'm really honing in on the story here. I thought the story was okay. It was pretty predictable in a lot of ways, and there was still kind of a couple plot holes here and there, I thought. The dialogue was really lacking. in the sense of, not that there wasn't enough of it necessarily, but just that it was very simple and bland and flat, and it just didn't kind of work for me. It could have been way better written, I should say. And of course, I'm a writer, I should be able to say that better. And so anyway, I dug it better than the first movie, but I still didn't love it. And they're setting it up for more sequels. I think it would have kind of worked better if he'd got some other writers involved. They could have paid me. Other writers involved and made it a streaming series, like made it, 7 or 8 part series. I think that it would have flowed better. And I think he could have done more along the way instead of kind of trying to make 2 separate movies out of it. Anyway, just my personal opinion. So that's the kind of stuff I've been checking out. I've also been working on, as far as personally, been writing another script. I finished one script last month called The Rise of Night. It's a sci-fi horror, aliens and stuff, invasion script, and I was just having fun with it. And now I'm writing a different script, more of a drama. And so I'm working on that, and I'm going to be coming out with another fantasy book soon. Caleb Book 2, Caleb Book 1, The Citadel is out. The Citadel is out, and Book 2 is going to be coming out here in the next couple months, called The Way of the Fist. So be looking for that. All right. So here we're going to get into chapter 6 of The Henchman. We're getting close to the end. I think I'm going to finish it out around episode 8. Kind of make it like a streaming series, except I'm reading it for you. And episodes are not quite as long. And in this episode, in chapter 5, if you haven't seen it, but if you want to, maybe stop and go back. But in chapter 5, he kind of grieves the loss of his friend, his informant, and ends up kind of going to Lord Hugo as a possibility of someone who has stolen the boy, the son of his master, sort of thing. And of course, he's challenging him to tell him where the kid is, or he's going to just basically kick everybody's butt. And that's where we end, where he counts down. He gives them a count, and then that's where we start. So that's where we're going to be, and it's going to be kind of a kick butt episode. So let's get to it. Chapter 6, Outnumbered. I said 5 and leaned forward, reached out, and grabbed the handle of the hammer, all in one motion. The rest of the room erupted. I had marked every thug and their position when I walked in the room, even their weapons. 9 thugs. 6 had clubs. 2 had hand axes. 1 had a glaive, the short elven sword. A long sword hung on Lord Hugo's belt. Legend said he took it off an elven captain. He probably did. Experience brings benefits. In this case, 100 rooms over 20 years, full of violent men and women ready to kill me at a moment's notice, and I had survived them all. I held a picture of the room in the back of my head, loosely, and brought it forward in a heartbeat. Hugo reached for the sword at his hip. Isha, to my side, gripped her daggers. With Bone Wrecker in my hand, I stood and lifted my knee under the edge of the table, knocking it up and at Lord Hugo. The table pitched at him, a barrier between us, and Hugo scrambled back, his feet trying to find purchase to get out of the way. He fell out of his chair. The sunlight through the windows glistened off steel daggers, rushing my body, and Isha doing her job to finish me quickly. I finished standing and swung the hammer at Isha, twisting at the waist. She had to make a split-second decision. Finish me and take the hit, or jump away and leave me alive. To her credit as Hugo's bodyguard, she didn't flinch. My swing was too fast, though, and hit her right arm before her daggers reached me. A bone snapped in her upper arm, and the dagger dropped from her hand. Her body shifted from the hammer's blow, and it affected her left hand. The blade meant for my heart plunged into my shoulder. It still hurt. I grunted and continued my turn, striking at her head with my left hand. She began to duck, but I struck her temple with enough force to stagger her. The dagger remained in my shoulder. No time to end her life. Two thugs bore down at me, both with clubs. I crouched under the first man, who swiped at me with a thick stick, and I raised Bone Wrecker up and smashed it into his chin. Half his face crushed in. He gurgled and fell backward. The second thug also attacked with a shorter, thicker club, and I sidestepped the strike. It glanced off my shoulder, the one without a dagger sticking out of it. With Bone Wrecker high, I brought it down onto his knee. His leg bent a direction it wasn't supposed to. The thug cried out, and this time my fist connected on the bridge of his nose, bringing a loud crackle, and down he went. 7 thugs left, Hugo and Isha still in play behind me. Facing the rest of the room, men approached me from every direction, ready to surround me, which I needed to avoid. 2 men together at my left, closest, yet somehow apart from the rest. I leapt at one of them, a man with a short axe in his hand. He swung the axe, and I caught his wrist with one hand. Keeping my grip, I twisted and angled my body to slam into his, pain shooting from the dagger in my shoulder. I positioned him between me and the second thug, who had been lunging with his club. The second man's weapon came down on the head of the first, dazing him, and I threw the first into the other. The second thug took a deep breath, and in his distraction, I punched Bone Wrecker forward to the first one's face, blood splaying and rendering him unconscious. I let the first one fall, and I leapt over him toward the second. That thug had recovered enough to swing the club again, which I blocked with my hammer. The club cracked against stone, and I kicked the thug in the groin, hard. When you're outnumbered, you fight dirty. The man froze with pain, and in that instant, Bone Wrecker flipped in my hand when I raised it high. Then I whacked him on the top of the head. He went down. I felt a presence behind me, and I twisted, but not fast enough. An axe blade sliced down my back. If not for the leather vest and my movement, the cut would have been deeper. I cursed, continued whirling around, and backhanded the thug in the cheek with all my strength, a bit of anger behind it, and his head snapped to the side. Bone Wrecker followed my fist, and I slammed the stone hammer into the middle of his chest. He went down, unable to breathe. The 4 remaining thugs rushed me. I reached down and grabbed the axe out of the fallen thug's hand, and standing straight, I threw the axe underhanded. The axe flipped end over end, and the blade embedded into the closest man's forehead. The other 3 adjusted, again trying to surround me. I slid to the side and jumped forward, attacking one on the far right. He tried to block the hammer with his club, but Bone Wrecker slammed it into his face, and when he retreated a step, I followed him with a strike to the side of the head. 2 left. I sidestepped another club, and the second had a short sword. The one with the sword stabbed straight at my stomach. I couldn't move fast enough and got a slice across the side, above a hip. Once more, the leather protected me enough, but now I had 3 bleeding wounds. I wouldn't last much longer. Swiping the hammer around, I hit the first thug in the chest, and he fell on his back, bouncing a bit with the force. I avoided the next slash from the short sword and brought the hammer down on his blade. The elven blade extended, broke in 2. He raised a broken sword before me. I finished him quickly with a smashing blow to the head. I caught movement in my periphery and spun around, adjusting my grip on the hammer to throw it somewhat blindly. The hammer flew straight, and when I faced the opposite way, Isha stood there, one arm askew, the other finishing her own dagger toss. Her eyes barely had time to widen before Bone Wrecker crashed into her head, taking her down. The next heartbeat, her dagger protruded from my bicep. I retreated a step, crying out, and with my empty hands, I now faced Hugo. The Daigal Lord stood a few paces away, holding his curved elven sword in a low guard. He grimaced with anger. "Now it's just me," Hugo said. "We'll see how good you are." All right, that was chapter 6 of The Henchman, Outnumbered. You let me know what you thought of it. I'm going to be doing chapter 7 here in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to try to have 7 and 8 and finish out the story in the next month by the end of May. So let me know what you thought of it. Put it in the comments and let me know some of the things that you've been watching and reading, and maybe what you thought of The Sunlit Man or some other things that I've been watching, and get some of your reactions there as well. And remember, you can like, follow, share, all that stuff. Subscribe for this YouTube channel because it's really going to help me get the word out and really help to teach other people how to tell great stories and start some great conversations, all right? So until next time, peace.